What is going on, everyone? Welcome back to Wildcat Cave. We've talked a lot of basketball this summer, but it's that time of the year. It's football time in the Bluegrass, and with the new sports gambling law that's passed in Kentucky, I thought how better to get back into football season than with a video all about betting. Today, we're going to look at each SEC East team's season win totals, and I'll tell you if I would take the over or the under. Really quick before we get into the gambling side of things, please hit that subscribe button for me. Like I keep saying, we are closing in on 1,000 subscribers. I'm so proud of the community we built here already. Let's keep it growing. So if any of you guys aren't already, subscribe now so you don't miss out on what we have going on over here. And speaking of what we have going on, stay tuned in the next few days for a big announcement from me. If you're a fan of the channel or even just a UK fan in general, I think it's something you're going to really enjoy. Now let's talk a little football. Okay, so we're going through every SEC East team, and we're going to look at their schedules and tell you how many games I think they're going to win. Now don't take these as my season predictions. I'm worried much less about which games these teams are going to win compared to the overall number of wins. We're betting the over or under the line that Vegas set for each team. So don't take these individual games to heart, just kind of in general the number of wins. We'll start out at the bottom here with the Vanderbilt Commodores. Their over-under is 3.5 games. They open up with Hawaii at home. Vandy blew Hawaii out last year on the road, so I'm going to take Vandy to win this one. Then they have Alabama A&M. Again, I think that's a win for Vanderbilt. Then I think they take their first loss against Wake Forest in Week 3. It's on the road. Wake Forest isn't a terrible team. Vandy, I think, is going to be better than we've seen them. I just think they lose this one. Then they travel to UNLV, where I think they actually might win that game. I don't think UNLV is very good. So there's 2 wins, 2 losses for Vanderbilt. Then you have Kentucky coming to Nashville. I think Kentucky avenges their loss from last year, ends up beating Vandy. Then you have an interesting game that I think the whole over-under season win total kind of hinges on. You have Missouri coming to Vanderbilt. This was a tough game last year. I don't think Missouri's going to be very good. I think Vandy's a little better than they were last year. I'm going to take them to beat Mizzou right now and give them 4 wins. But, maybe it's not this game Vandy wins. It might be a different SEC game. But I do think Vandy hits that 4-game threshold. And from there, I have them just losing out. Even though they beat Florida last year, I think they lose. It's at Florida next. Then you have Georgia, at Ole Miss, Auburn, at South Carolina, at Tennessee. I don't see Vanderbilt winning any of those games, but I do think they hit their 4 wins to give the over bet for Vanderbilt this year. Next, you have the Florida Gators. Their over-under is set at 5.5, which means to go over, you have to win 6. Under is 5. They open up at Utah. They won this game last year. That was Anthony Richardson's breakout game where he got all the national publicity until Will Levis came to town and kind of crushed his dreams. And then with this just being at Utah, Utah's a really good team. I think Florida's getting better. I just don't think they're quite to that level. I kind of think last year might have been a little fluky. But I think Utah wins this game. And then they play McNeese, which I think is an easy win for Florida. Then they have Tennessee at home. I think Tennessee's going to be worse. I think Florida's going to be a little better than they have been. But as for now, I still have them losing to Tennessee at home. Then they play Charlotte, another easy win. Then they travel to Lexington to take on the Cats. I still think Kentucky's a better team than Florida. They have been for the better half of a decade. I think Kentucky wins that game. Then they get Vanderbilt at home. Like I just said, I think Florida wins. Then they go to South Carolina after that. I think they lose this game, but it is extremely critical, and I think it's close. I could see this game going either way. I think if it was in the swamp, I would pick Florida. Right now, I have South Carolina winning this game, but I'm not sold on it. Then they have the Georgia game at a neutral site in Jacksonville. Again, I think that's a big L. Then they play Arkansas. This is another critical game. I think there's 2 key games on Florida's schedule. I think it's South Carolina and Arkansas. Both of those teams, Florida can beat. But if they want to hit the over of 5.5, I think they have to win 1, maybe both if some other things go south for them. I think they beat Arkansas just because it's at home. It's the exact reason I picked against them for South Carolina, but I think they beat Arkansas. Then they travel to LSU. I think LSU is going to be really good this year. So they take an L there. Mizzou at home, Mizzou on the road. I think they handle their business with Missouri. Florida wins that. And then they finish with a loss to Florida State at home. Florida State was really good last year. All projections see that they are going to be just as good this year, if not better. So overall, I have Florida at 5-7, which puts them just under that 5.5. But like I said, if they can pull out the Florida State or the South Carolina game or maybe even the Tennessee game, then they'll hit that over. I think Vegas did a good job setting the line on this one. It's really close in my opinion, though. Then we have Missouri, who's over-under 6-5. They start the season with South Dakota. I think they win that. They have Middle Tennessee next. I think they win that. And then they play Kansas State, who finished 14th in the AP poll last year. Missouri is nowhere near a top 25 team. If Kansas State is any shell of what it was last year, I think they lose this game. Then they play Memphis in a neutral site in St. Louis. I think they win that game. I don't know much about Memphis's football program, but I can't assume it's as good as an SEC program, even a mid-tier one. So I think Missouri wins that. Then they play at Vandy. Like I just mentioned, I have them losing this game right now. That's a 50-50 game for me. That game could go either way, but I'm going to try to stay consistent and say that Missouri loses this one. Of course, LSU comes to town. I think LSU beats Missouri. They go to Kentucky, where I think they take another L. And then they get South Carolina at home. I think this game kind of falls right in a good spot to win for them, right after they suffer a loss to Kentucky, who they consider a rival. It's right before going to Georgia, which is a big game. Could be a trap game for Mizzou, and they come out and lay a big egg. But South Carolina, I don't think, is good enough to be consistent, long enough to win a ton of games. So they're going to have to lose a couple here and there. For South Carolina, I think this is one that they could overlook while Missouri's scrambling for a win. So I had them beating South Carolina and then losing out after that at Georgia, Tennessee at home, Florida at home, and then they finish at Arkansas. I do have them losing to Arkansas, even though they won that game last year. Again, a little fluky, but that puts them at 4-8 in my opinion. So I'm going to take the under for Mizzou. After that, we have South Carolina. South Carolina also set at a 6.5 over-under. They open up playing North Carolina in Charlotte, which is a game that I kind of thought would happen every year, but apparently doesn't. But I think they beat North Carolina. South Carolina is going to be a decent team again this year. Not as good as everybody always makes them out to be, but good enough. I think North Carolina is, they're kind of on their way back down to normal. They've had a really good couple years. I think South Carolina wins this. Then they play Furman, an easy win. Then they go at Georgia. They're going to take an L there. Mississippi State at home. I think with Mike Leach passing, every time he leaves a program, that it takes him a few years to rebuild because he runs such a unique style. I think Mississippi State's going to be down this year, so I think South Carolina gets them at home. Then they go to Tennessee, where I think they lose. Florida at home, like I said, I think they win that, but it's a 50-50 game. At Mizzou, I just said they're going to take an L there. And then they go to A&M. A&M's a tough place to play. Teams, they usually do pretty well against the East for whatever reason. And while I don't think A&M's a great team, I think they're, for some reason, always pretty good. So I think they beat South Carolina. They come back home, play Jacksonville State. I think they get an easy win. Vanderbilt at home, another good win. Then Kentucky comes to town. This is going to be one of those games, again, it's a 50-50 game. And I'll talk about it when I talk about Kentucky's schedule here in a second. These two teams don't like each other. I don't think the coaches like each other. It's always a dogfight. It's never pretty, especially when we go down there. But I think with them beating us last year with Will Levis being out, I think that this team and Mark Stoops is going to have a chip on their shoulder. I think they're going to be looking for revenge. And I think we're going to go in there and we're going to beat South Carolina at South Carolina. But I do think South Carolina redeems their loss with a big win at home against Clemson to finish the year. So I have that at 7-5, which gives you the over bet on South Carolina. And then we have the Kentucky Wildcats, the one everybody's been waiting for. Their over-under is also 6.5. A lot of 6.5s here in the SEC East. Now, Kentucky's schedule could not set up odder. The first half of the schedule is extremely easy, and the second half is extremely hard. It was rated that Kentucky's first 4 games, I believe, is the easiest in any Power 5, but the second half is far from it. So Kentucky opens up with Ball State, W. EKU, W. Akron is a win. At Vanderbilt, I think they avenged that loss last year, much like South Carolina, and get that win. You have Florida at home. That's a game Stoops and company always gets up for. We've been better than them for over half a decade, like I said. So I think they beat Florida at home, and then they travel to Athens to take on Georgia. I think we can all hope, but I think that's a pretty obvious loss for the Cats. Then we have Mizzou at home, which is a win. Then they have Tennessee. Now, you guys know me. I want to beat Tennessee with everything in me. I hate Tennessee. There's no part of me that wants us to lose to Tennessee. I have a hard time picking us to win against Tennessee. Tennessee's had our number for the ever, pretty much, without, take out a couple years. They've been better than us most of my life. But I think at some point they just have to come back down to reality. They lost their quarterback, Hendon Hooker. They lost their receiver in Hyatt. I don't think Joe Milton is all he's cracked up to be. I think Tennessee takes a decent step back. They're not going to be terrible, but I just don't think they're going to have that overwhelming success that they experienced last year. I'm taking Kentucky to beat Tennessee right now. Like I said, I'm less focused on the games that they win, and since we're just doing over-unders, I'm going to take the win in Tennessee, and I'll explain it here in a second. At Mississippi State, I think Kentucky, they're going to drop one. If they beat Tennessee, they're going to drop one that they shouldn't. I think that could come against Mississippi State, and they play at Mississippi State. And again, I know I just said Mike Leach is gone, and it's going to take some time for that program, but they still have Will Rogers. And it seems like anytime we play Mississippi State, the home team wins. Will Rogers is a good quarterback, so I'm going to take us to lose to Mississippi State. And then Alabama in Lexington, I think it's going to be an electric game, an exciting atmosphere. We haven't had them there in forever. It'll be really, really fun, but I don't think we win. I think Alabama beats us at home on Senior Day. Then again, we travel to South Carolina, another one of those must-win games. This is going to be one that we have to get if we want to consider it a successful season. And then we go at Louisville. I think Louisville will be better this year under Jeff Brom. I think he's going to build a decent program, and it's going to be a competitive rivalry again. I just don't think it's happening this year. I think we win. So like I said, it's not about the specific teams that we're beating or losing to. It's more about the wins and losses just to bet the over-under. Kentucky set at 6.5. If you're picking the safest bet out of all these I'm talking about, I think Kentucky over is the best. I think, I have them here at 9-3. I think that's a little optimistic. But even if we drop that Tennessee game, that's 8-4, and we're still a game and a half over. And then even if we drop another game like South Carolina, we're 7-5, and we're still hitting the over. So I don't see really many scenarios. If this team goes 6-6, I think it's going to be considered a very big disappointment, almost to the failure level of what this team's capable of. So I think that these games, maybe you disagree that they lose to Tennessee or that they won't beat South Carolina or whatever. They beat Mississippi State. It doesn't matter because the over-under set so low for Kentucky. So if you're asking me, that is the safest bet out of any of them. And then you have Tennessee at 9.5 wins. I think it's a high bar to set for a program that's had one good year recently. They open up with Virginia in Nashville. I think they win. They beat Austin Peay at home. They win at Florida, even though I think that game's really close. Then they beat UTSA at home. And then South Carolina. South Carolina won that game last year, but it was at South Carolina. I have them beating them right now. But like I said, Tennessee's going to take a step back, and I don't think they're running the table. So they have to lose some of these games. So I think right now I'm going to pick them to beat South Carolina, but I'm not confident in it. Texas A&M at home. I think it's a win, but only because it's at home. I think those two are kind of, A&M in the West is what Tennessee is in the East. They're always wanting to be right there, but they never quite get over that hump. So they're both going to be fighting for like second or third or fourth maybe in their divisions. I'm going to take them to win because it's in Knoxville. Then they go at Alabama where they lose, come to Kentucky where they lose again, like I just said, even though I do think they're going to be really up for that Kentucky game coming off of Alabama loss. Then they play UConn at home. I don't know what an SEC team is doing playing UConn, but, Vols, if that's what you want to do, whatever, you losers. And then you got at Mizzou, which I think is a win. Georgia at home is a big L, and then you end the season with a win at Vanderbilt. That puts them at 9-3, just under that 9.5 win total. So I'm actually taking Tennessee for the under. I just don't see them without Hendon Hooker and Hyatt and those guys. I don't see them recreating last year and going 10-2. Maybe I'm wrong, and maybe they'll be great this year. I just don't see it. And then finally, the Georgia Bulldogs at 11.5, which basically is asking the question, does Georgia lose before the SEC championship? The answer is obviously no. I think they run the table, and I think they'll win the SEC East again. That is going to wrap up this video, guys. Thank you all for watching. Once again, hit that subscribe button for me, and let's get to 1,000 subscribers before football season. Also, stay tuned for that announcement video coming very, very soon. But for now, let me know in the comments which teams do you think I got right and who I got wrong. I'll see you all soon. Go Cats.